Well, hi, everybody, and welcome to Ragdale's first online Teen Talk with Laurie Frankel, the Hannah Judy Gretz Fellow for 2020. We are all getting used to our new lifestyles of staying at home with its many big challenges and its silver linings. And one of them is that we get the pleasure of meeting and talking to Laurie in Seattle from the comfort of our own homes. And we're reminded of how much we all need good books at a time like this. So I just want to give you an update on Ragdale. The campus is closed and the artists have now left either on or before March 20th. And staff is now working from home. And we're working towards putting some of our online programs online. This one will be edited for the classroom. And we had planned lots of upcoming school programs, some of them on campus, like our Arts and Nature Week. And we had a great staff meeting, and we are now working on making videos with our artists that incorporate all kinds of arts and nature themes. And we will be getting those to the classrooms. So for their e-learning or their online learning. So even though the campus is closed, I do want you all to know that we're still working and a lot is still happening. Before we start, I just want to thank Hannah, who's here with us, for starting this incredible fellowship in 2005. Her fellows have been almost all women. They have all been incredible writers. Hannah's a very avid reader, which means she went through a very big pile of books before she came up with her favorite, which was Laurie's This Is How It Always Is. So I just want to read Laurie's bio so I don't leave anything out. She is the New York Times best-selling, award-winning author of 3 novels. Her writing has also appeared in the New York Times, The Guardian, Publishers Weekly, People Magazine, Lit Hub, the Sydney Morning Herald, and other publications. She's the recipient of the Washington State Book Award and the Endeavor Award. Her novels have been translated into more than 25 languages, and all 3 have been optioned for film or TV. A former college professor, she now writes full-time.
Thank you.
She was recently named one of the 50 most influential women in Seattle, where she lives with her family, and I hear makes incredible soup. Her 4th novel, 123, is forthcoming in the winter of 2021. So I'm going to ask Laurie a few questions. I'd love for you all to sort of chime in via chat. I started it out there for you. And so Laurie, on your website, there's this interview with Nancy Pearl, and you talk about the writer's life of isolation. Now that the rest of us are trying to live that life, can you tell us, what is your day like? What is your work day like usually, and how has it changed since the crisis?
Yeah, wow, that's a really good question and a really great way to put it. First of all, thank you all so much for being here. It is really a remarkable thing to wake up to all of your faces. And Hannah, I don't know which of these squares is you, but I'm so grateful to you and really so sorry that we didn't get to meet live and in person. But someday soon we will meet live and in person. And that too, I think, is actually the answer to this question, which is that there are a lot of ways in which social isolating and writing have many things in common. You're not wrong about that. But gosh, it's all in the details. It's funny. I have not seen that Nancy Pearl interview, and Nancy also tells me she's never seen any of those interviews because neither of us can abide doing this, looking at yourself online. It's much more interesting to look at other people online. But I can imagine when I say that there is definitely the extent to which what writing requires is sitting on your butt in a chair for hours and hours and hours on end. And the more of them you can string together uninterrupted, the better for, I think, creativity and productivity. That said, it's never possible. It is always the goal, and it is never possible. I am very lucky at this point to be writing full time. I was very lucky to be able to give up my day job after I had written all of my first and most of my second novel. So I do this now. It's something that looks like all the time, but is nothing like all the time. And I am therefore very, very disciplined about making sure I'm working while my kid is at school. And it is interesting the way in which school gives you a nice structure to your days, because I really get very little done when she's home, and therefore I'm really good about getting lots done when she's not home. And now, of course, she's home all the time, which makes it quite a bit harder. So my writing day tends to look like, if she is out of the house, I am writing, I am working. And that is, on a good day, like 6 hours. And I think that feels to some people like a lot of time to just be sitting and writing. And in fact, I find it's less daunting than it sounds. One sort of gets into a groove and keeps doing it. It is also true that the beginning of novel writing and the end of novel writing have no bearing on one another. They have nothing to do with one another. And so that varies the days too. Drafting is a completely different day than an editing day. Never mind like a copywriting day or an emailing day. So that's nice too. I think sometimes students feel like, oh, I'm just going to sit and do the same thing every day. And in fact, it varies widely, and that also helps you to sit down and be productive when your kid leaves the house.
I see that your walls are very clean and bare, but I imagine that writers, are always putting Post-it notes and mapping things out on the wall. Do you do that?
I do that, but I don't do it on the wall. Okay. You're actually looking at my laundry machine, which I realize is much less romantic than the beach. But it was the place most likely to be quiet this morning. So it's not very romantic background, I don't think, as far as writerly backgrounds go. I am not great at outlining, unfortunately. I go into novels with no idea how they end, or really what happens much past the midpoint, and even that first half I'm usually very wrong about. Therefore, I do take a lot of notes and leave myself lots of signposts, but they don't tend to manifest as anything nearly as organized as a Post-it note, I'm afraid. Which sounds ridiculous because Post-it notes don't even sound that organized. One of the things that I did while I was at Ragdale after dinner one night was teach everybody around the table how to use Scrivener, because I swear by it. I think it is the best tool for writers. I would never write a book any other way. And therefore I do all of my note taking and outlining and Post-it noting right in my Scrivener document. This because my first novel, I had notes on napkins, I had notes on receipts, and I would have this feel, I'd just walk around the house all day thinking, I know I wrote that down somewhere, I have no idea where. So it's really useful to me to keep it all together in the same place. Not because I'm organized, but actually the opposite of that. Because I lack organization, it is useful for me to be insane all in the same place.
It's interesting. So, given that this book is about a transgender child, and you have a transgender child, why did you write a novel and not a memoir?
Yeah, all right. It's such a good question, and it's such an obvious question, and it's definitely the question that I get asked all the time. And the honest answer to it is, oh my gosh, it never occurred to me to write a memoir. It's such an obvious question, and yet it just did not cross my mind. The true and the most honest answer, I guess there is to that, is that we are very, very blessed and very, very lucky that memoir would have been really, really short and really, really boring. Because in fact, our our lives are really pretty boring, which is exactly how you want your life, but it is definitely not how you want your books. So so therefore it had to happen in novel form. It's also true that I was pretty keen to protect the privacy of my kid, and therefore didn't want to write about anything that had actually happened to us. But mostly, I am a novelist by trade, certainly, but also by like disposition, by inclination. I feel I really want to. I really want to make things up in order to tell the truth of things, and that is a very novelist sensibility, and one that I believe to the tips of my toes. So, like, one of the things I wanted to think about with this book was how something like this impacts a whole family, and how a variety of children, kids are weird. I mean, kids are really weird, and sometimes that weird is something that we think is really creative and quirky and wonderful and to be encouraged, and sometimes we think that weird is alarming and needs to be investigated by a therapist or a doctor. And I was really interested in where we draw those lines. And so I thought, I need to write a book with like a dozen children. And that was too big, and it had to get dialed back. But I really wanted a big family, and I really don't, I mean, in my book, not in my life, sometimes in my life, but definitely in my book. I wanted to look at lots and lots of characters, and I couldn't do that if I wrote a memoir, because I have only the one child. And it's, sort of the beauty of it. It's, I think it would be hard to have 5 small children, but it's easy to write about 5 small children. And so, it allowed me to look at all of these aspects of a thing that I really wanted to be able to explore in lots of detail. But like the true and honest answer to that question is that my life is really, really boring, and therefore I cannot write a memoir. And, may it be ever thus. I just think it is not a terrible prayer to send up to the universe. Please let me never have anything to write a memoir about.
Well, you certainly added a lot of exciting things in the book. So kudos. I'm a huge fan of fairy tales. I read fairy tales all the time. So can you, there's a fairy tale that, runs through the book pretty much from the beginning to the end. Can you talk a little bit about how that works?
Yeah, gosh, for sure. Endlessly. Hours. I'll try not to. Yeah. So part of the answer to that is that I thought at the beginning it was going to be a nice device for me. It's sort of what you were talking about the Post-it notes. Going in, I thought, this is going to be a really good organizational tool. It'll keep me on track, and it'll help the reader keep track of where we are and who we're dealing with, and at what stage each of these characters is. And so, I'll have this fairy tale that can mirror their lives, and it'll be really easy it'll be this nice device to help me write it and to help people read it and follow it. And then it turned out to be just the most enormous pain in my butt, because it mirrors the plot of the book. And every time, as I say, I just don't know what's going to happen in the book going in. I change it so much. I cut so much from this book.
Really?
I cut twice as much as ended up in this book. And so every time I changed the main plot, I had to go back and change that fairy tale as well. It was the first things that I wrote, and it was also the last things that I wrote were all that fairy tale, because I wanted it to run throughout. That said, I did it because fairy tales are formative. They're the first stories we tell our kids. They're the first movies most of our kids see. They are intercultural. They span time and distance and and eras and they're as transnational and across eons and epochs as anything you like, and therefore they are really important. They're really important formative stories, particularly for kids. And this is a book that is largely about kids. I used to teach the gateway course for the English major when you declared an English major. at the university, you would come to me and take the How to Be an English Major course, and I always started it with fairy tales for that reason. And so they're really wonderful stories. However, there are some really problematic stories in all sorts of ways, and in particular on this front, I think for transgender kids in particular, but really for kids in general, because the suggestion is change is instantaneous, it is painless, it is a reward for being good, and it manifests as you getting an outside that matches your inside, and that's not how change works. For anyone, change is slow, and it is painful, and it is ongoing. And when you get to the other side of it, there is this trace of what there was before. Of course there is. You wouldn't want it any other way. And that's a good thing, not a bad thing. And of course it happens whether you are well behaved or not. So I really wanted to see, like, what of that fairy tale aspect that is useful I could keep, and what if it could be changed to be a story that works better for this kind of transformation, and really for all of the kinds of transformations that we actually undergo.
So true. I wanted to ask you about the cities that the book takes place in. So you chose Madison, Seattle, and Thailand. Could you talk a little bit about those three choices?
Yes, gosh, I'd be thrilled to. So one of the things I'm always at pains to say is that Madison, Wisconsin is a wonderful, fabulous, beautiful place, and we should all be so lucky to live there. And I think that the family starts there, and then some terrible things happen and they leave. It's not because Madison is not a wonderful place. It's because plot. Things must happen in your novel, otherwise people stop reading it. So I was really wanting to move it, to actually physically move this family, and to move them someplace that would be geographically really distant. So I wanted them to start in the middle and go to the edge. I wanted them to start in a kind of a flat place and go to a mountainous place, and all of that was for reasons that had nothing to do with anything but plot. I also am always at pains to point out that when the mother in this book decides that they just can't live in Wisconsin anymore and have to move to Seattle, it's because she's crazy. It's because she's gone around the bend a bit, and that's important too. So that's the first move. Then they come to Seattle because I live there, and it makes it easy for me to write about. And I haven't always lived here. I am from Maryland, so I think I've been in Seattle for, gosh, like a decade and a half now, but it still feels new to me, and sort of remarkable. And I guess I see it through fairly new eyes, and that means that it makes it interesting for me to write about. It is also true that Seattle is left of left. We are quite progressive out here, and I needed that for the plot in the middle bit. And then in the third part of the book, it moves to Thailand, which was a surprise to me. I did not know going in that was what was going to happen, which is also the peril of not outlining and of not knowing. And I sort of thought, at the beginning I thought they might go back to Wisconsin. I liked the kind of full circle of that idea. And I knew that this family needed to get out of their bubble. I knew that I wanted a mother-daughter trip. I knew that they needed to meet some other transgender people, besides this one kid. There were lots and lots of places I could have done that. The thing that I did not know going in, the thing that wasn't super clear to me until I got there, was that I was very keen to end this book without saying, and then she decided to be a girl forever, and then he went back to being a boy forever. I really wanted to end it in the middle. This is very difficult in English because pronouns don't work that way.
Right.
I briefly thought about narrating the thing in the second person because you is nicely gender neutral. Yeah. But that got really annoying really quickly. So I spared us all that particular draft.
Did you actually go to Thailand?
And so then I actually went to Thailand. My mother, who I think is one of these little squares on here somewhere.
Mom, wave.
Can you see her? I think she's here.
Yeah, she's on my second page. Okay. Sue Hess. Hi.
Sue Hess. Hello. I realized that I had to go to Thailand, and I spent, after this, I didn't fully realize this until I got to the end of part 2 and typed, "She agreed to go to Thailand." And then I said a word I will not repeat because we were recording this for school, but it wasn't a nice word. And, because I thought, she can't go to Thailand. I've never been to Thailand. How am I going to write this part of the book? And then I spent like 24 hours Googling this problem, and putting my little avatar down on the Google map in Bangkok and like wandering around. I went to the Thai restaurant up the hill and like smelled the pad Thai and like wrote down some adjectives. And then I called a travel agent and said, yeah, I need to go to Thailand. And actually I need to go to Thailand like next week because I can't finish this book. And it was like the week before Thanksgiving, and my folks were coming out from Maryland. So I called my mom and said, "Do you want to stay afterwards and go to Thailand with me?" And she was like, "Okay, totally." So so we cooked dinner for 16, I think, and left all of those dishes in place and went to the airport the next morning, and went to Thailand for a couple of weeks. And we had to see everything because the travel agent said, "Oh, great, what do you want to see?" And I said, "I don't know, Thailand," because I didn't know anything. And I didn't know what I was going to need, and I certainly wasn't going to be able to go back. So it was necessary to go and to see everything and to take as many pictures as possible and write down as much as I could, so that when I figured out the couple of scenes that I was going to need, I would have it. I would have it in my brain, and I would have it in my notes, and I could use it as necessary. And then we got on the plane to come home. It's quite a long, several flights, for which my mother slept for almost all of them, and I wrote for almost all of them, so that I had most of part 3 drafted by the time I got home, because I didn't want to forget.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Did you actually visit a clinic in Thailand?
Yes, and we actually visited a clinic. That was the other thing that the travel agent was able to do for us, because of course that's not on the tourist itinerary, and we had to get government permission to go and visit, and they were doing, just remarkable, breathtaking work.
It's incredible.
Yeah, it was humbling is what it was. It was really a remarkable thing, and it was very kind of them to let us look at and witness the services that they were giving, which of course, we could do nothing but stay out of the way.
Mm-hmm. So I want to ask you a little bit about Ragdale. You were in the last resident group that left Ragdale by March 20th. I think you went back a little bit earlier because the Seattle schools had shut down. Yes. So yeah, tell us what, was it your first residency, or have you done many before Ragdale?
I have done one before, and in fact that was very different. So it was in many ways my first real residency. And it was remarkable. It was, among other things, heartbreaking to have to leave halfway through. And gosh, Ragdale is a remote, isolated house with a bunch of writers who never leave. Is a strange place to be when the pandemic hits. We're all saying like, gosh, I've seen how this movie ends, and it's not great. It was, however, until we had to leave, just a truly magical place. This is the thing about artist retreats. In many ways, interestingly, it circles back to your first question, which is having the time and the space just to work, and not to have to worry about food, and not to have to worry about getting your kids the places they need to go, and all of the thousands of other things that have to happen during the day, is an incredible gift, and it leads to like a truly astonishing amount of productivity. It is simply, as far as hours of the day, not just to get words down, but like to let your brain think, don't panic. It's okay if this hour wasn't productive, because you have the next hour. And it's okay if you tried this thing and it didn't work, because you have the next hour, and maybe the next thing you try will work. And it's okay if you spend this hour being productive by taking a walk in the prairie and being inspired and thinking about these other things and getting your creativity to go to this other place, because you have the time and the space for it. And so that, I think, is part of the magic of what Ragdale provides, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But the other part of it is that when you do take a break to go get a cup of coffee, or to go for a walk, or to go to dinner, you have these people there who want to talk to you about what they're reading, or what they wrote, or the music that they composed. And they want to tell you stories about, this email that their editor sent today. And you think, oh, yes, this reminds me of this other thing that that my editor sent me. And you have these conversations that can't be replicated anywhere else, and that are genuinely magical. I think not just for like one's psyche, but really for one's process. It was astonishing to me every night that we would gather for dinner, and then we would talk for 3 hours after dinner, and then we would go work some more because it was so inspiring. That having worked already for 10 hours during the day, and then taken a break for 3, and now it's 10:30 and you can barely keep your eyes open, and still I'm going to sit down and write for an hour before bed because people have said things that I think, I have to get that down because I don't want to lose it before morning, or I'm so inspired by this that it has to go in the mix. The challenge, I think, for artists always is that you do so much in isolation, and as the world is seeing, isolation is tough. It is not nearly so simple as, now I have more time. It's much more complicated thing than that. And so the opportunity to share it with others, and to have work colleagues for the first time is really just, it is magical. Not enough can be said about it. And it's something that I forget, frankly, when I am just in my house working. It is something that it takes going to Ragdale and connecting with people to remember. And
yeah, I'm thinking
very grateful to be there, and I hope I can come back and finish someday.
Yeah, I'm thinking about all of us in our isolation and how challenging it is. I mean, I didn't think it was going to be this challenging, but there's so many nuances to either being home alone, or even being with your kids all day, or someone else's kids all day. In my my experience, there's just so many things, and it's nice to be able to gather like this and exchange ideas.
It's amazing. It's really amazing.
So I want to get to some of the questions. Let's start with let's see. I'm not sure
Karen
where.
had the first question.
Let's start with the first one from Karen. Would you just give an overview of the novel for those who haven't read it?
Yes, sure. This novel, this is the more take on.
Yeah, that was
yes, the novel is about a family of with 5 boys, the youngest of whom becomes a girl. So it's about a transgender kid, and but only sort of, or that's only one of the things it's about. Really, it's about how change impacts a whole family. And as I was saying before, it is about how all of our children are weird, and sometimes that weird is something that we think is really wonderful, and sometimes that weird is something that we think is really alarming. And I wanted to think about which is which, where we draw those lines. And really, I hope that it's about parenting in general, which is the extent to which you never have any idea how to do it. And as soon as you figure it out, the challenge changes and becomes something else. And yet still there's nothing for you to do but keep showing up and figuring it out as you go along. And I think that so often, speaking of isolating, I think that parenting is often pretty isolating. And you think, this is my problem, and there's no one who can help me, and there's no one who would understand, and I'm the only one who's going through this, and my kid is the only one who's going through this. But in fact, I think this is how it always is, for all kids and all parents. And the extent to which trans kids are presented to us is very unusual and very anomalous, and I think and unfortunately sometimes dangerous or frightening or or violent. And not only do I think that that's not true, in fact I think this is how it always is, which is where the title comes from. The title is not mine. That is, I didn't title this book. I didn't title any. I've never titled a book. Someday I long to title a book, but it hasn't happened. It hasn't happened to me yet. But the line in the book is mine, and I think it's a tough title for a book because I think it's hard to remember. But I like that it allows me to talk about that line in the book, because that really is the seed of the idea for the whole thing. That this thing that seems so strange is in fact so exactly how it is for everyone all the time. That's what the book is about.
Mm-hmm. And moving forward with that, Hannah would like to know if you could give us the little elevator speech about the other books. What are they about?
No, Laura.
Oh.
I've read them.
Oh, for everyone else.
Yeah, and I want to just say hi to Laurie. Nice to see. I don't know if you can see me now, but
and you. Now you've spoken, Hannah. It's so nice to see you.
So sorry we didn't get to meet in person, but I just want to make sure everyone knows these are Laurie's other 2 books. I'm sure her mom is proud of me for doing this.
Yes.
And I just read them in the last month. I chose Laurie on the basis of this is how it always is, but these are equally wonderful, beautifully written, interesting. So I kind of specifically want to know, where you got the ideas for these. And this one I think is so timely given now that we're all on Zoom all day long. So that's
first of all, thank you so much. It's so nice to meet you. I'm really glad to see your face, and also your bookshelf, which is really impressive. That's a good background. We should all have bookshelves in our backgrounds. And yes, thank you for plugging the books. It is true. I've now written 4 novels, and they're all really different from one another, which kind of plagues my people. My agent feels like it might be nice to focus, but alas, no. And I too have been thinking that that Goodbye for Now has become, gosh, so timely, which is interesting. So the premise of Goodbye for Now is that it is about a software engineer who invents a way for people to first email and eventually do this, video chat with their dead loved ones. It's not a ghost story, it's a technology story. And the idea is that he is able, by collecting all of your data and the information about you online and the videos about you that are being recorded online and your voice and all of that stuff, to recreate you after you're gone. I published that book in 2011, I think, 12 maybe, 10, something like that. Not quite 10 years ago, I think I published that book. And it won the Endeavor Award, which is an award for science fiction and fantasy. And it required you at the time to imagine a world where everyone would video chat on their phone, which at the time was like the littlest stretch of believability. And, and therefore it was pitched as science fiction. And it's very interesting to me how it's not like I wrote this thing 50 years ago. I wrote this thing 10 years ago. And if anything, I undershot. If anything, we have become much more living online and much more present online. And definitely this technology, has taken off and is never going back. So this thing that at the beginning, especially, my agent was like, I don't believe this, is now like, oh yeah, remember when it was just that, because it's gone so far beyond. It's been interesting to watch. Really, like just this week, how much this has changed. I've been Zooming with book clubs for a couple of years now, because book clubs, because it allows me to do this, and no one had ever heard of Zoom. Before like Monday, and now everyone is on this thing, and because that's how technology works, it just spreads like it spreads like that. It spreads like wildfire because you say like, oh look what we can do, and all of the good things about it are immediately apparent, and all of the ways in which it might be problematic don't come until later. So that's what you need novelists for.
Hannah, you wanted to ask also about the other book, right? The Atlas of Love.
Sorry, I didn't unmute. Let me just say the ways that we don't anticipate. I will just tell you that my junior in college son was doing his class with his small group online last night when I walked through the family room wearing nothing but a shirt. Got that? So yeah, so tell us about the genesis of the Atlas of Love, if you would.
Okay, that story is really funny. Gosh, I mean, you must have made their day. They must have been thrilled. Yes, The Atlas of Love is my first novel, and the genesis of it is also a useful thing to talk about, especially if we're going to record this for schools, because I had no idea what I was doing or even whether it could be done. One of the things that is true is that it's really difficult to practice writing a novel. So when we take classes in high school or in college creative writing classes, you can take a poetry class, and you can take a short story class, and you can take an essay class, but you don't usually get to take a novel class because they're too long. When I used to teach short stories, I could have students read a couple dozen of them, every like a dozen a week. Every couple weeks we would read a few dozen short stories, and then they could write one every couple weeks, and then we could workshop them and and talk about them and pick the good bits and get rid of the bad ones, and you can practice. And that's not true of a novel. So when I sat down to write The Atlas of Love, I just did not know whether it could be done. I do not think anyone does. I don't think you know whether you can write a novel until you try to write a novel. So I sat down and wrote a chapter, and then I wrote another chapter, and then I wrote another chapter. I was keeping them all in separate files, which was dumb because I had never done this before. And at the end, I had to spend a whole day cutting and pasting them into a single file. And then I did a word count, and then I went over to Google and Googled, how long is a novel? Because I had no idea. And it turned out I had written a novel. And I just did not know until that moment. And I had set out to write this novel about family. And I had set out to write a novel that is about the ways in which there are lots of different kinds of families. There are lots of different arrangements that make a family. So that book is about 3 friends who raise a baby together. And that was sort of the idea I had gone into it with. I didn't know what was going to happen. And then I wrote the thing and found out what was going to happen and went back and revised it. I was completely clueless, and in some ways I miss it because it's really nice to write without expectation, and in a way where you just kind of show up every day and think about genuinely what happens next and nothing else. And so now I'm so lucky because I have all of this apparatus to help me. I have an agent, and I have an editor, and I have a publisher, but therefore I'm thinking about them all the time. And I'm so blessed to have people who will read my books, but I'm thinking about them all the time, and I don't want them to be upset, and I don't want them to be disappointed. And the first book, I thought probably nobody was ever going to read it, and it was a very different way of writing. Not necessarily better or worse, but just it was a really different process. And it is interesting to go into a project that big being that clueless.
Great. We have a question from Sally. Do you want to say it out loud, Sally? You want to unmute yourself? You got to unmute yourself. There.
Can you hear me?
Yep, now we can.
Okay. Hi, Laurie. This is virtually thrilling.
Me too. I'm virtually thrilled.
Okay. So I loved your book. Loved your book. The transgender theme, the fairy tales they all felt completely accessible to me. The most fictional concept was the husband-father, who seemed like He did. He seemed like a creative, patient saint. Was that what you intended?
That's so funny. That is really, really funny. So one of the things is, this is an obnoxious answer to this question, but unfortunately it's a true answer to this question, which is like, I'm well married. My husband is really a rock star of a human, which is dumb luck. And I just am so lucky. So I have to plug him. Like, that's the short answer. The longer answer is that as a reader, and also like as a viewer when I'm watching television or movies, I get really frustrated when people who are supposed to love each other don't communicate with each other. I get frustrated when, there are whole plot points that hinge on lying or like flouncing out of rooms, slamming doors and walking away and, and getting lost and refusing to talk. I find that irritating as a reader. I sort of think, like, it reads to me as a plot hole. I think, well, okay, but you are supposed to love each other, so why wouldn't you have a conversation about it? So that's part of it. And then, like, the even wonkier answer than that is that it's a book. So I want to use words to talk about things. I am not really interested in yes or no questions. I am much more interested in how than in, for example, whether. So I think the question of like, will you love your child no matter what, is kind of a boring question, because the answer ought to be yes, and and if it's no, then okay, it's a tragedy, but then there's nothing to say after that. Whereas how is a much more interesting question. So like this question of, if your kid were transgender, would you still love that child anyway? Yeah. And my follow-up question is, great, how? What are you going to do about it? And one of the things that interested me going into this book was how two people could both want to show up and both say, yes, of course, we will love and support you no matter what, but have really wildly divergent ideas as to how on earth that might happen, because that's what's hard. That's what's an interesting question. I'm not interested in answering the question, whatever the question is, but I am also always interested in asking the question and saying like, okay, but did you think about this side? Okay, but like, what about this other side? Did you think about this other thing? So I like to have married people who can talk to each other, because that way I can fully explore things on the page.
Great.
I also am more interested in dialogue than exposition. So left to my own devices, I write plays, and my editor says things like, could you maybe describe, something? That'd be great. And so that's how you get characters like that.
Great. So 2 more questions and then we will wrap up. Laurie, do you want to ask your question? You have to unmute.
Yes. Okay. Hi, Laurie. Great name. And I'm a Madisonian, so I loved the Madison piece. I'm a Jewish girl from Madison, so in many ways I felt like the story spoke to me in lots of ways. I loved the character of the grandmother, and now that I see your mother, I'm wondering if she was at all created from your mother. I found her believable, laudable, and loving. She was also the voice of faith in your novel. Was that your intention? Was faith an important part of the story, in your opinion?
Oh, I'm so glad you loved her, because she shows up in all of my books. And the one that I'm just finishing right now, that will be out maybe next winter, I didn't put her in until really late. So it was like the 3rd draft, and she just showed up one day and I couldn't believe it. Because this character runs through my novels. It is true that my mother is very close with my kid, and is a very good grandmother to her. But of course, she's my mother. So I think of her as a mother rather than grandmother. I was very close with both of my grandmothers, and I was very close with both of my grandmothers. So it's not a super surprise that they they keep showing up. In particular, my mother's mother, it was a very feisty, no nonsense sort of a woman. And so I think, older than most when I came to understand that the stereotype of grandmothers was like, you know, old and sweet and doddering and very polite and cookie baking, because my grandmother was much more of the like Jack Daniels drinking, smoking, speaking her mind sort of grandmother, and therefore, of course, I thought all grandmothers were like that, and therefore all of my grandmothers are like that in fiction. If not in life. It also, though, was really important to me to have that character in this book. I know so many parents of trans kids these days, and at this point, and so many of them themselves can get their heads around this, but they really, really worry about telling their parents, and they think, you know, they're old and they're not going to understand, and sometimes they don't. But it is very interesting to watch how often they kind of get up the nerve and have this conversation with the grandparents. The grandparents are like, okay, because this is what grandparents suit up for. You know, the kind of love of, your total love of a child, without, frankly, the day-to-day management of said child. That's what grandparents are great at. Unconditional love is a really wonderful thing for grandparents to be their job. So in this case, I really wanted to talk about the ways in which, you know, of course they can get their head around this. They can get their head around anything, and their job's to love the kid, and so it was good that I had that character to do that. Anyway, I'm glad you like her, because gosh, she's always there.
Okay, so very last question from my mother. Vivian, do you want to unmute? I'm not sure if she can. Anyway, her question is, how did you choose the names, such great names of your characters?
Oh, great. Yes. Oh, I'm thrilled you think so. I spend a lot of time at the beginning picking names. In fact, I started a new book while I was at Ragdale a couple weeks ago, and so someday, if that book ever gets finished and comes out, you will see that lots of the characters are named after like things that were in my room at Ragdale, or things that were in the prairie at Ragdale. I spend a lot of time at the beginning thinking about names, because again, it drives me crazy as a reader when I am reading books and I cannot keep track of the characters. And I'm a very slow reader. I'm a very careful reader. I'm a very good reader. And even I can't keep track of these characters some of the times. And it's not like it's not because like the names rhyme or they begin with the same letter. It's much more like normal boys' names. All of these names sound exactly the same in my brain, and I can't remember who's who. So at the beginning, I go and I tried to give like one kid gets a normal name and one kid gets a weird name, and then a couple of kids get like a name that I'm going to give you a cheat. I'm going to give you a clue so you can always remember who they are. I'm going to tell you why they have this name, so that when they come back again, you can remember them. And some of them get names that, you know, have something to do with like what they do. So like Penn is a writer, so you can remember that one. And then some of them get names that I'm going to tell you a story about. I'm going to tell you a story about Rosie and why she is named after a flower. And then you're going to remember that. It is the kind of thing that at the beginning, like, so when I was writing my first novel, I thought this probably doesn't matter. And then in fact, it matters, I think, hugely, just as, especially because I tend to write these books with big families and lots of characters, and then you can't keep track of them. So I want to try to give you a little cheat sheet.
That's great. Well, I can't thank you enough. This was so much fun. Thank you for helping us on our maiden voyage, our first rodeo, doing a tea and talk online. This was great.
It was my pleasure. It was my pleasure to be here. Thank you all for doing this with me this morning. It has been a joy.
And I want to say, thanks to all of you, and let you know we have a campaign that we're starting to help get Ragdale through the crisis. And we have an incredibly generous trustee who is doing a matching gift for up to $50,000. So if you would like to give a donation to Ragdale to help us through the crisis, that would be incredible, much appreciated. And the first 30 people who give $50 or more will get Laurie's book sent to them in the mail. So you will get a copy of This Is How It Always Is as a token of our appreciation. So I think we're going to follow up, Sam, White, with an email.
Yeah, one addendum. I noticed that I only have 28 copies of the book here. Maybe there's still 2 floating around at Ragdale, but we definitely have 28 copies. And I put the link to our donation page in the chat, so please check that. And just make sure that you add your address to that. So, of course, we know where to mail the book.
Great. Great. Well, thank you, everyone. It's been wonderful.
Can I just chime in, Laura, for 1 second? It's Gina, and I just want to say thank you, of course, to Laurie for sharing this wonderful experience with us. I know we all needed a little break today, and this video has been recorded, so it will go out to many classrooms, hopefully as well, and other people who couldn't be here virtually with us this morning. So thank you, Laurie, for your time. I hope you enjoyed your stay at Ragdale. We hope you come back. And I want to thank Hannah, who's on the line, hopefully still as well, for bringing you to us. She has a great eye for talent. Book, yes. And look forward to reading your next one. So thank you to Hannah. Thank you to Laurie. Thank you to Laura and Sam for supporting us and making this possible this morning. And to our anonymous trustee who is matching our gifts to help Ragdale through this difficult time. I know everyone is faced with many challenges right now. So I think we're all doing the best we can, and hopefully we will all stay connected in some very positive way. So thank you for joining us, and stay healthy and be well. That's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, stay healthy and be well. And we'll hope to see you soon at another online Tea and Talk.